Hi, this is Peter Hamilton with Documentary Business, and my guest today is that great expert in all things programming and a dear friend of Documentary Business, Dan Salerno. Great to have you on board, and we've got a really interesting topic today, ripped from the headlines. Ice Road Truckers comes back to History Channel after a break. So welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Peter. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So as you can see, Deadline featured this as a lead story. It's no big deal at all, or no small deal. I'm sorry. And Dan, why don't we have a look at the trailer or the promo for Ice Road Trucker, which is coming back, I think, on October the 1st. So here's history's promo.
I'm ready to roll. There's no margin for error. It's life and death up here.
This single load can open up the door to a bunch of opportunities for Muskie Creek.
Holy cow! The truck's on fire!
Whoa, I can't see. Tell me this don't get your heart pumping.
Ice Road Truckers, new season Wednesday, October 1st at 9:30, only on the History Channel.
So there you go, Dan. History blasting the return of Ice Road Truckers. Launched in 2007, and continued until 2017. And you and I had a conversation yesterday, and we calculated that there were 138 episodes over that period of time. And that's an extraordinary run. Ice Road Truckers was the anchor of History Channel's programming during history's boom time, along with the incredible success of Pawn Stars and maybe a couple of others. So, I mean, what's your overall takeaway, first of all, about the success of Ice Road Truckers and its companion hits of the teens?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty well-known story, but Nancy Dubuque took over as general manager, right around 2005, 2006, somewhere in that time frame, I believe. And she started looking at how to broaden the definition of history, a la History Channel, so that it wasn't just this sort of the reputation they had of World War II and black and white and archive footage, and sort of they were self-restricting like a lot of brands do. We see this with a lot of networks, don't we, where they get a name for the network, they come out of the gate with the brand, and then they kind of box themselves in. And she said, if it happened, it's history. It doesn't have to be, something that was 100 years ago. Could have been something that was 5 years ago or even 5 months ago. And that opened it up. And she started doing some research. And I think, again, you see it in the Deadline article and some of the other trades. They looked into past performances on what was one of their best performing series at the time, Modern Marvels. And they noticed this Ice Road Truckers episode popped. And based off of that, they started exploring. And then, one thing leads to another. Conversation with Tom Beers. And sort of at that time, he was really on the rise, coming off of the success of Deadliest Catch. How do we take some of the formats that Tom had pioneered with these obdoc reality, real kind of male audience driven content, and how do we apply it to the History Channel brand? And lo and behold, Ice Road Truckers was born, and it comes on the air in 2007. I believe it aired on Sunday nights, if I'm remembering, and it ran for a good decade, with a peak right in the middle where it was just, it was going gangbusters. And speaking from personal, as a viewer, and not as somebody who works in the business of television, I watched it. It's not the kind of thing that I normally would watch, but I watched every episode, DVR'd them, and then sort of came back and watched them, not as live, really. And, even though I knew intellectually nobody was going to die and the truck was never going to fall through, and they were going, right? Like, I think they were going 15 miles an hour, but the close-up shot of the tire going over the ice, you don't know it's 15 miles an hour or if it's 115 miles an hour. So as a viewer, I'm sucked in every time thinking this is the episode where it's going to happen.
High
Of course,
stakes,
it never
right?
did.
Built in.
Yeah.
And
So
so we've got a chart here that shows the number of episodes by season, which is very interesting, ranges from 10 to 16 over those years from 2007 to 2017. And we just gave the total 138 episodes. And Dan and I just did a little very crude but illustrative back of envelope math. We're thinking if the average budget for each episode is 400,000, we're talking about a $55 million spend over that time. It's a very considerable investment and generates a lot of fees, producer fees, and then also a lot of employment. It's a big impact, as well as just the ads that are generated and the incredible success of history during that time.
yeah, it really is. It's not just an investment on history's part, but in this case, a lucrative investment on the part of the producer with original productions.
Right.
It was part of a larger portfolio that they really developed. Deadliest Catch probably being the best known. Ice Road Truckers. They had, I think Axeman was theirs, which came off the heels of Ice Road for history. They had one on oil, oil rigs, and was it called Black Gold or something like that, for a network that doesn't really exist anymore called Spike, around that time. And it begat a real specialty business for them, but also a genre that really spread out to the production community, the nonfiction production community, all across the US, Canada, Europe, and UK in particular, where this format really started to blossom as a result of what original productions had done. So
they're called OcuSoaps. Was that a generic phrase for this?
Yeah, it went by a lot of different names over the years, right? I think Obdocs is a really big descriptive phrase that comes out of the UK. OcuSoaps has been part of it. Character led is one that a lot of I know the networks that I work for, we use the term character led in our ad sales presentations because it's a very ad sales friendly descriptive, as opposed to having something with the word soap or doc in it. So you massaged the name of it based on your audience.
So I'm going to move on. I had another thought about the numbers. I remember I did an analysis of A&E spend, A&E network spend, and history is part of the A&E family of networks. And by the way, they were a client for several years, but I'm not disclosing any confidential information here. But we guessed that their annual spend on programming was about 1.2 billion.
Wow.
At the peak of the kind of OcuSoap, however you define it, era, like the mid-teens. It's a fraction of that now due to the impact of streamers, and we're going to have another conversation about what's happening across the streamers. But in this case, what does it mean that 8 years later, Ice Road Truckers returns to the history schedule? What does it say about today's challenges for history's management?
It's a great question and a topic you and I have talked about sort of online and offline now for quite some time. As pretty much anybody who's attended an industry trade show, inevitably it's the focus of a keynote and a panel and podcasts and so forth. It's really, I think, very interesting to see History Channel in a sense reboot. They're not using the term reboot. They're just saying that it was on a hiatus. I think is the term they're using. But I think it says that, one, the IP is important. It's known. It's a brand name that even a decade later, they don't really have to explain from scratch as if they would with a new property.
It's a beautiful title, by the way, Ice Road Truckers. It just,
so
those three
clean.
words together are so evocative of whatever you want to pour into it.
It is, and it's one of those titles that as a programmer you love because it just says what it is, and you don't have to get too complicated with it. it allowed them to do spinoffs. I don't know if you remember at the time they did a spinoff series. It only lasted one season where they went to the Himalayas and they basically took some of the ice road truckers to the Himalayas and did the Indian roads. Really, honestly, when I watched it, even though I'm watching it on television, I felt nauseous as I watched the fronts of these trucks go over the edges of the mountains with no guardrails. They did another spinoff in the Andes as well. So they really made good use of a concept that is seasonal in nature, right? I mean, the ice roads only last for a short period of time. So this isn't like a studio driven show. This isn't like a warm weather set show, say at a zoo where you can shoot not 24 hours a day, but 365 days a year. This is one where they've got a very tight window. They made the most of it at the time. I think bringing it back though to your original question, the challenges for networks now is breaking through. And you can see with something like History where it does not have a built-in organic streaming service. If we've talked over the last couple of years since the launch of the streaming services, both the perils and the benefits of having a companion streamer, right? We talked about it a lot with Discovery Plus originally, and then now then Max, and now HBO Max under a rebrand. And I'm sure we'll be talking next April, according to the Zaslav article, when the split occurs, where that will evolve to as a whole. But, Nat Geo is the other nonfiction brand with Disney Plus. And you can see how they kind of work in tandem with each other. A&E's never had that luxury. They don't have the A&E Plus. So they've had to kind of rely on their own linear landscape that's been shrinking. And like all linear networks, the way they're dealing with the shrinkage in both their budgets is largely in either a shrinkage of volume. So X number of hours last year, X minus 10% this year, or a lowering of the cost per hour or your investment. And if you lower the investment, what's that going to do to quality? And they have done what a lot of networks have done, which is maybe move into co-productions. Occasionally an acquisition we've actually seen now on History with Mysteries of Above. But this particular show with Ice Road Truckers, in the announcements, you can see they're partnering with Chorus Entertainment out of Canada. And I'm pretty confident they didn't have those relationships on the original series. And that is probably a really big factor in the economics of why they can bring back such a well-known brand.
So the net cost of 400,000 an episode is shared with Canada and earns tax breaks above with an impact way and above the audience in Canada. So they're not paying 400,000 per show, but still would have extensive rights outside Canada.
Yeah, I would think so. And I think, when you start to look into it a little bit, just in your head, and I should say, we've not had a conversation with anybody directly at History. So we're speculating on the pieces and how they come together, based on our experience. You could assume a show that takes place in Canada, because Ice Road Truckers takes place in Canada. This is not an American company doing a show in Los Angeles and then trying to bring in a Canadian partner. This is a show that geographically is located in Canada on the Dalton Road with a good piece of their shooting. That is ideal for a Canadian partner and Canadian credits. And I just have to believe I wouldn't be surprised if they're bringing in a minimum of 20% of the budget via Canadian tax opportunities because of that. And that really puts a dent. The other thing that could be a factor, and you don't know until we see it, but the rise of AI in filmmaking, and it started to integrate itself into the creation and the process of making these shows, depending on how they use it, both behind the camera and maybe even on, in front of the camera, might actually take that budget circa 2015 and knock it down a number of notches in today's dollars, simply because. And we believe that might be the case with another reboot that preceded Ice Road Truckers on history. Well, another one of the shows that I actually really enjoyed personally called Life After People. And
That's interesting.
they revitalized that after a 15-year absence, 15 years, 2 seasons, and then it was gone. And now it came back this year, short run. I personally hope they renew it. And they very clearly state in this program right at the opening that artificial intelligence is being used extensively in the imagery. And for a show like Life After People and the concept that it allowed them to create worlds that don't really exist, probably way more efficiently and cost effectively than what they could do in 2010, 2011. If you transpose some of that technique maybe into the Ice Road Truckers and, how they tell some of their stories, again, your $400,000 budget can come down because of a Canadian co-pro. It could come down because of modern technology and techniques in production. And now it's in a reachable range for the economics of 2025.
I got another thought too, and that picks up on your comment about how several of the big network players have streamers like Nat Geo and Disney Plus, and then History and A&E networks don't have a powerful streamer. So that becomes a question of whether you're an arms dealer or a streamer.
Right.
So they're an arms dealer. They're selling their programs, not only to international audiences, but domestic audiences too. And I'm noticing Ice Road Truckers showing up all over the place. So, there's irrespective of the budget, there is a revenue stream attached to franchise programming like this that just stretches across the decades, maybe the centuries since we're.
Without a doubt, I haven't surveyed it recently, but you can find you could find A&E networks programming, not just History, but also A&E network itself, with something like the First 48 that has 300 to 400 episodes available. That is effectively evergreen in most of the instances. You can find that in fast channels now that they've created. So there's a revenue generation opportunity for them. You can find them in straight up program sales to other streamers like Discovery Plus.
They're licensing them, right? It's not just rev shares.
Yeah, and it's a nice, I'm sure it's a nice revenue stream for them that they can bring in. They can, and they've got now so many seasons of some of these series that they can sell early seasons without cannibalizing their current ones. You don't want to, without numbers, I can't assume anything, but it was a very well-known fact that in a different era, in a way, that Big Bang Theory being released in syndication and its extensive high-end performance on TBS, on cable, is one of the things that actually brought viewers to the series in its premieres on CBS and boosted it. And so as opposed to kind of fatiguing the series early, it did the opposite. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of that happens with Ice Road Truckers or First 48 or any of the other A&E networks brands that they put out there. So I think the hard part for them, though, is as the distribution of cable itself is diminishing, and now
because History in
networks
2014-15 was, I think, in more than 100 million households, and
pretty darn close to 100 million. Yeah,
and there was even a moment when they were also developing and scheduling fiction series where they were talked about as a viable emerging challenger to the broadcast networks themselves. So what we're talking about here is managing decline as an important but still second tier audience, right?
Yeah, I have to say, I think they've done fairly well with it. You can't you can't sort of keep pushing the stone uphill. It's their I don't know where their distribution is exactly right now, but it's considerably down, like most cable networks. I think 70 million is the peak for the most highly distributed networks now. And I don't think History is even close to the 70 million. If I remember right, they don't have a deal with YouTube TV, and that's a considerable amount of distribution that they're they're going to miss. That has a real impact, obviously, on their revenue, because not only you lose your affiliate revenue just as your sub base comes down, you lose your advertising revenue because you've
lost your access to audience.
Yeah, when your raw delivery is down 30%, your ratings can hold maybe the same, but when the denominator in the fraction goes down in your distribution, you're down 30% in the number of eyeballs you deliver to an advertiser. And so that sort of takes it down as well. And then, you figure out how to juggle it. Again, the co-pros are a great way to find the same quality, but for a lesser price. You do things like, with American Pickers and Pawn Stars, they do a pretty effective job of packaging and compiling their shows. So they have the best of American Pickers, Ancient Aliens. They combine multiple episodes into like a 3-hour format and call it Declassified. So they're finding creative ways to work their inventory, as all cable networks are. And when you look at where they've headed lately, they've sort of evolved into a network now that is relying on a handful of really strong tentpole specials. I'm working off memory here, but most recently Sitting Bull was a big one. Jim Thorpe was a big one this year. And they're like either a 2-hour sort of, feature doc format, or there may be a 3 or 4 hour mini series a la Lincoln or Grant, President Grant. And around that, they use these legacy series or legacy formats that, a lot of their recent formats will be something that is sort of hosted by a celebrity, right? They get Dennis Quaid on Holy Marbles. They've got Lawrence Fishburne on History's Mysteries. Henry Winkler with Hazardous History. So they're using sort of a celebrity face to get out there and break through some of the promotional clutter. And then their legacy series, Pawn Stars is still hanging in there. American Pickers is still going strong. And now you see they're bringing back Ice Road
Truckers. This is a really fascinating conversation, Dan. Love chatting to you about this. So Ice Road Truckers brings to the surface strategies for declining networks, and we're impressed with what History are doing. And in an upcoming webinar, we're going to look outside at the cable and satellite programming universe more widely and look at the strategies of Nat Geo, Discovery, and a bit more on A&E networks, and then other players too. So Dan, thanks a lot. Great chatting today, and look forward to our next conversation.
Always fun, Peter. Thanks for having me. And thanks to PACT as well. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, PACT, and thank you, Caitlin Cooper, our producer.